thank you to the three speakers. We now have question and answer time. So to participate, just scroll down from where you can see the video in Delegate Connect website, and underneath you'll find a question area. So click on the blue button that says ask a question, and you can type your question in there to get it to my attention so I can put it to the speakers. So Greg has posted a couple of questions straight up for Alina, asking about Whirl. So he's asked first, has Whirl approached dealers? And if so, what was the reaction?
No, we have not yet approached dealers, but the intention is not for Whirl to completely displace the car dealer. The intention for Whirl is to help make the job of the car dealer easier by educating the electric vehicle interested party or intender before they're at the point of wanting to buy, and then support the car dealer with a genuine lead. And the reason for that is that many people have expressed to me needing to educate themselves about electric vehicle technology more so than a particular brand and its offering, and wanting to do that with a person, and also wanting to have an experience in an EV before they come to the point of a decision. So to the extent that we can alleviate some of that early stage education at a small fee for the interested party, and then help qualify leads for dealers to make their sales part of the process easier.
Yeah, and I think dealers are still struggling to catch up and to understand, a lot about EVs and the market for them. So as you say, I think the EV owners themselves are often much better placed to inform prospective buyers.
And can I just add, Natalie, they're such experts. I mean, anyone who's bought and owned and operated an electric vehicle at this point in the early stage of the market has done a lot of research and has so much knowledge to share. So to the extent that they're willing to do that also for some benefit to themselves, I think will really be a valuable matching experience.
Well, flowing on from that, Greg also asked about charges and how Whirl could fund itself to grow. So what is your model for charging?
At the moment, there is only the electric vehicle model, and the focus of that is it's hard to launch more than one product at a time. So focusing on electric vehicles is the priority for at least the early part of 2021. But you're absolutely right, Greg. There are a number of technologies that flow on from the making the decision to buy an EV, starting with your home charger, following on with your electricity accounts, or whether or not you own your home and you can accommodate solar or any other kind of renewable energy product. So my hope is that if we can demonstrate that the electric vehicle test drive matching works and peers can come together to create a viable social shopping experience, that we can then expand it to other technologies.
And I think Greg is also asking about sort of not only the electrical charging aspect, but financial charging. So what cost would be involved?
Oh, I'm sorry, that kind of charging. I completely missed. I was so focused on what Hannah just said that I was all about charging. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So as a starting point, Whirl's intention is to offer electric vehicle test drives for $30. I say starting point because with all new technologies, you have to trial where we think the market's at. But I've done quite a bit of research and modeling, and it seems like that's the right price for an experience that can provide electric vehicle shoppers access to a car, expertise, but also have the convenience of doing it locally. So there are a number of electric vehicle customers that don't have a dealer or a car available to them through a public event, even particularly because of COVID nearby. But if they had someone around the corner who would be willing to sort of sacrifice a little bit of their personal leisure time to provide that kind of demonstration, I think it's worth $30.
Sounds great.
If I can jump in there, Natalie, obviously in the sector I'm in, 50% of what we do is education. People ring up and they say, I'm thinking about an EV, and I love and hate those calls because they take up time, but they're a really good opportunity to talk to people about, the EV experience. But we can never take people to that next step of actually getting them behind the wheel. So, and I was talking to a guy who's working on EVs in the mining space. And as you can imagine, on a mine site, big burly guys, all used to their V8 utes, that kind of thing. And they didn't want to know about EV utes. They just did not care. They didn't want to know. But he said they found that if they could get them behind the wheel of one of these for half an hour, they could change their mind on it. It was a done deal. So yeah, what Alina's putting together, I think, is going to be a game changer for that shopping experience.
Thank you.
Yeah, look, it comes down to that point that I think Alina made in hers. It's fun to drive them. So that's a big aspect. So if we can switch the focus now to Hannah's talk. Warwick has asked about stimulating EV tourism in Gippsland, and he asks, what are the prospects of filling the charging gap on the Princess Highway between Bega and Moe? Is there any discussion around that in the project?
I know that's not those councils were definitely involved in our project, and they had done their own investigation before that too. I don't know of any that are planned at the moment, but I do know, and I don't think this is private, but Arena will be announcing in early January more public charging infrastructure fund to try and fill in more of those gaps. So I don't let your council know to put their hand up and try and get some funding to fill the Gippsland area.
So who's providing the funding for the existing Charging the Regions project?
So that was those councils combined with the Victorian state government. So it's kind of funny because back when the Charging the Regions project was going, an Arena, I guess, future was a bit uncertain, and the funding for public charging seemed to be finishing up. And now, come the end of the year, we've got Victoria government getting more money allocated for public charging, and so is Arena. So there's been big change. But the Charging the Regions had already gone ahead, so they'd already got their money to put their project together. But I think there'll be a lot more coming.
Which is very good prospects for charging. That's great. Emma, Suzanne asked a question about with the program IdleOff, what behaviour change around schools has been noticed so far as a result of the campaign?
Yeah, look, obviously it's all been anecdotal. We're working on, with Claire Walter, who's our health expert, we're working on actually having some air quality monitors, kind of a before and after measurement to really be able to, get some statistics and some science behind what we know. There's some work happening in the inner west of Melbourne around Yarraville, which is an area that's particularly heavy, but the traffic is particularly heavy with trucks moving to and from the port. And there's serious concerns around particularly childcare centres, but primary schools in those areas, and how those trucks are affecting health. But anecdotally, we find the feedback we got from the first few school groups was that they would talk to their fellow students, and they would talk to their parents, and the responses came back from parents around, oh, well, I've got a brand new car, so it's got a good filter on it. And so we ended up doing a few FAQs for the students to say, well, actually, there's no safe level of tailpipe emissions. And the old thing of, if it uses more petrol to turn your engine off and back on again than it does to, just leave it idling. And yeah, maybe in 1973 it did, but no longer. So, so anecdotally, we're seeing a behaviour shift. However, obviously students kind of do the project for 1 year, and then it kind of disappears again. So we're working on ways that we can continue to have that message repeat year after year in the schools that start doing it.
And the bottom line is they're the drivers of the future as well, Emma. So you're educating them.
Yes, and because I don't drive a Tesla, whenever I do go out to see school groups, they're always very disappointed with me driving a plug-in hybrid, because these kids know more about Teslas than I do half the time. In fact, you occasionally meet these school groups and year 9, year 10 students and think, how long till we can actually hire them for the projects we're working on? So very engaged with this technology. Yeah.
Okay, any potential IdleOff sponsors in the audience? They need a Tesla as part of their program.
Yes.
Look, I listening to that, it really struck a chord with me, particularly more so than schools, more so at my kids' sporting events. I really notice, and some people will, particularly in winter, like they will run their car as their own personal heater throughout the whole sporting event. So that made me wonder, have you had any engagement with sporting clubs around the issue?
Not at this stage. That's a really good area that we should move into. We've been focused on trying to get an in with the Department of Education here in Victoria, and we're working with some great people up in Sydney who have those contacts, and they're sort of doing the same up that way. But sporting clubs is on the list, but we're not quite there yet. Interestingly, the biggest inquiry we're getting currently is from community groups. So, local sustainability groups, for instance, who want something not so much for their schools, but just for their general, local community. So we're working on a poster at the moment that's actually can be coloured in. So it's a colouring in IdleOff poster that kids can, create, and then it'll get stuck up around the local community.
Well, Peter has asked a question about that. He said, can there just be signs around schools and other public areas asking, please turn off your engine? Have you got any traction with that kind of activity?
Not at this stage, but yeah, that's what we've been starting to work on. To actually create signs that are, sort of a permanent metal backed or aluminium backed sign is obviously, there's a reasonable expense there. So yeah, we're very very early stages of seeing how we might be able to find some funding to help with that kind of thing.
Fantastic. So there's another question that has come up for Alina from Clive asking, and this is something that I wondered too, listening to your talk, what are the sort of the insurance issues around having someone do a test drive, and how do you manage that as part of the program?
Look, it's a good question. I think insurance is always front of mind when you're thinking about handing the keys of your car over to someone else. So early days, because Whirl is still a young company, our intention is to offer test rides until we can arrange the right level of insurances, or ask our electric vehicle owners and the shoppers to sign a waiver. So most of the insurances offered, particularly for new cars, like an electric vehicle, have third-party provisions. So you can actually have someone drive your car, but that doesn't mean in the event of something happening unsavory that you don't want the right level of coverage. So it will have to be part of the model as it evolves, but early days, so that we can demonstrate that it works, we'll be asking for a signature on a waiver.
Great. We're really flicking around the different topics here, because we've got another question now for Hannah. Hannah, is there a strategy to plug gaps in the network where councils have chosen not or unable to participate at this stage?
I probably should have said, so while I guess 12 councils have continued on phase 2, that doesn't mean the other councils aren't continuing. So separately to that, particularly some of the metropolitan ones are going on their own and looking at where they could put charges in their community and kind of looking at it from a more just their municipality as a region. The reason the regional councils like to work together is because it's working together helps facilitate, I guess, the drivers from Melbourne getting to those regions where they've got to bypass different municipalities on the way. So from what we can see, there's a lot of local councils that are continuing in this space, but not necessarily as part of the Charging the Regions phase 2.
So have you got any tips or advice for people who are wanting to activate their councils more in this area?
Yeah, we'll get in touch, because during the project, the first phase of the project, a lot of them were saying they were hearing a lot from the community that they want chargers, they want to see that, they want to get more electric vehicles on the road. And there's that, as the others have mentioned, that barrier of if you can't see the chargers there's a bit of a, oh, if we get an EV, is a range anxiety thing, which is generally just a perceived anxiety, but still it's there and it's a barrier to uptake. So yeah, let your councils know.
Yeah, so it's just a matter of reaching out and telling them that you're there and that you've got that need.
Yeah, I guess the more support they have, that helps them get approvals internally as well, because councils have got limited budgets and they kind of will have to, put up for. But particularly if the councillors get involved and hear, then it's, well, they're like the politicians, so they get to say something, and then the bureaucrats underneath have to get it done. So.
And sorry if I can jump in again here.
Yeah,
sorry,
please do,
we worked with a fantastic group of people from a place called Buninyong, the Buninyong Sustainability Group up near Ballarat. And I think it was probably getting on for 4 years ago, they decided they wanted to put EV charging into their small town. It's a beautiful little place, lovely place to go for a coffee. And they wanted to encourage EVs and they wanted to put some charging in. So it was almost 4 years worth of work for them to find the right location, make sure that the power, figure out what the power supply was, what kind of charger could they put in, and work with the city of Ballarat to get the whole project off the ground. And they eventually got what's called an Ariga unit, which is an AC charging unit that we make here in Melbourne. It's the only one with Made in Australia registration. And we worked with these guys for getting on for 4 years. And the day we put that thing in was just the best day ever. And the guy that led that, a lovely bloke called Andrew Aitken, now I give his phone number out to any community groups that want to know more, and he will talk people through exactly what they did right, what they did wrong, and how to work with your local council to actually find these locations and get some charging in, even if it does take 4 years.
Hannah, in the last session, the issue of universal access for chargers came up. Is that something that's been addressed in this project?
It was raised that it's something that they need to consider to make, like, around what kind of adapters to use. Alina, good to answer this question.
There was also just the issue of people with wheelchairs or crutches having good access, and space around the charging station to be able to move safely.
Yes, well, we did recommend that when they pick their site, they make sure it's DDA compliant. That's the disability. I can't remember what the Discrimination Act. I think that's right. That I guess all car spaces need to adhere to, and so electric vehicle car spaces should as well. So the councils do have that on notice. Yeah.
Can I just also add, Natalie, in response to that question, something that I think Emma and Hannah would agree to is that at this early stage of the electric vehicle market, with all of us kind of innovating, it's really important to collaborate and work together and be open-minded. So insofar as electric vehicle charging access is concerned, there are some need to think about things like disability access and safety and security. There's also a need for us to consider the charger plug and make sure that the car that you have is compliant with the adapter that's provided at that particular station, which is information that's publicly accessible. But if you're a new customer to the marketplace, you might not know where to go for this information, which is why peers are super helpful. And then thirdly, and I think what Hannah was referring to is there's also a need for customers to be able to roam. So much like you would use your mobile phone in different networks, you would like to have access as a customer to different types of charging networks. And any barriers to one type of customer using a network versus another are currently being discussed at high levels in government and industry right now. But it is absolutely something the user community should be mindful of before they travel, just being prepared. And also, if you encounter any difficulty, to communicate it to the right people so that it's identified and can be rectified as quick as possible, because the sooner we can alleviate any barriers to electric vehicle use, the easier and more quickly we can grow the marketplace together.
Yeah, really valid points and really important. And as you say, it's a really great opportunity, being in at the ground level of a, fledgling, well, we think it's very established, but, a relatively undeveloped area, to really get it all right from the start and make it fantastic right at the outset. Hannah, another question that we've had is whether there's any correlation between the councils that have been more proactive in participating and whether or not they have a car dealer within their council area that sells EVs.
It's funny you asked that. In an earlier phase of the project that we did before charging the regions, we did a project led by the Goulburn Broken Greenhouse Alliance that was looking at getting electric vehicles to councils. And a barrier was that a lot of the dealers in their areas weren't trained and equipped to service or be able to sell, like Alina mentioned, the electric vehicles. So it was kind of a barrier. So I'm not aware of the latest on whether the councils in these regions have EV dealerships now, but I assume so because a lot of them were transitioning them into their fleet. But maybe Alina knows more on where there's still gaps in dealers. I'm not sure. But I think a lot of them are definitely getting on board now, realizing that the market's changed and there is a demand now growing for electric vehicles.
Alina, did you have any further comment on that?
Well, look, I don't specifically know about electric vehicle availability in various regions, but what I can say is that it's still difficult. You know, car dealer hours, for example, are not very favorable for people who work. And I know as someone with a young family, the weekends, I wake up on a Saturday morning and I swear the minute I shut my eyes, it's Monday morning again. They go by so quickly. So having more options and greater access, I think is a good thing for the marketplace, however it's presented.
Absolutely. Look, another question to throw to Emma. Just, growing up, I never remember seeing cars idling so much, and that might have just been oblivion, being at a younger age and not being aware. But has that been a social shift that people tend to idle more or undervalue even just the cost of the fuel that they're burning in that time? So and if that's the case, what's the change in circumstances or mindset that's led to this?
I would, look, off the top of my head, I'd say, we, despite the events of this year, we live in if you're in a developed country, you live a very abundant lifestyle where, you have easy access to everything you need to eat and to live and to transport yourself from point A to point B. And I think it's, we're not as frugal as perhaps my grandmother was. Sorry, I've just mental flashback to my grandmother saving 3 peas in an old margarine tub that she cleaned out and put in the fridge because she might eat them later, kind of, that kind of that kind of attitude. But I think as well, we're also more distracted. I watched a woman get her child out of her car and put the child in a pushchair and then but leave her engine running while she was flicking with her phone, and the child was kind of sat next to the exhaust. And so I think we're just more distracted these days as well. So there's no real excuse for idling your engine for heating or cooling on fairly mild days. There are only very few days where we actually have to have that happening.
And are there equivalent issues for EVs if you leave them running? Presumably, depending what source you've got your electricity from, you may be also effectively putting emissions into the atmosphere. Did you have any stats on that, Emma?
No, we don't. I guess IdleOff is part an education project and hopefully part of research project in order to give us all those baselines as to exactly how much is the atmosphere, particularly in a school car park, actually worsened at that 3:30 kind of timeline. Yeah.
Well, your talk is already having an impact because Suzanne has commented that she's part of a new soccer oval development, and she's going to make sure that the council's aware of the idling issue and see if she can get signs up as part of that. So it's already having an impact. So.
Excellent, that's great to hear. And there's an email address on the IdleOff website that comes through to me, so she's very welcome to get in touch for any more information.
Okay, Suzanne, make the most of that if you need more support with that initiative. So we're now coming to the end of our Q&A time. So I'd like to take the opportunity to thank you all very much for your time and sharing all your knowledge and experience with us, with the audience here today. And I'm sure if it was a live audience, there would be a very rousing round of applause for you all at this point. And everyone, I also just want to thank Clive and Mark, who are working in the background to make this all go smoothly. And I want to let you know there's now a 1 hour break for lunch, and which is also a really good opportunity for you to visit our sponsors, which includes the Victorian State Government, Jet Charge, EV, FIMA, and the Green Road Loans product from Transport Mutual Credit Union. So please take the time to check out, to visit them during the break. We'll see you back at 1:30 for some more wonderful discussion and really stimulating presentations. Thanks very much.